I'm really excited to introduce our host. I am a huge fan of this gentleman, both on Collider Movie Talk, his show Outlaw Nation. He is the champion of the movie trivia Schmodown. I mean, come on, John. That's pretty impressive resume right there.
Well, it's very kind of you, Charles. It's more impressive to put on a Comic-Con like this, my man. I'm so impressed with everything you've lined up, all the great hosts, all the great guests. I was listening the last 20 minutes of Jacob Kowalski telling me about all the stuff he's working on. What's that all about? I had no idea Fogler had all this stuff on the side that he'd built upon, all the books and stuff. So it's exciting for me being a host, but it's exciting for me just being a fan of this stuff to see all the great people you've brought onto this Comic-Con, man.
It's a fun site, it's like we're all comic book convention fans. So like we built a space where you can just literally go from hall to hall to hall and just see it all totally live. It's a real honor to meet you, John.
You too.
Like I said, I am a long time fan of yours on YouTube and everything you work. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you and let you go ahead and kick off this amazing panel.
All right. Well, I'm hoping they're here, and I'm excited to welcome them. And thank you so much to Chuck Lindsay over there. As I said, we just met for the first time, but he's very kind to give me a chance to do a panel here on the Mainframe Comic-Con. This is my first virtual panel of any kind at a Comic-Con where I'm actually hosting, and so I'm excited for this, and I couldn't ask for a better one to kind of pop my cherry with, for lack of a better term. And let's get into it. I'm excited to welcome these two gentlemen who have created one of the most unique comic book series we've ever seen in the history of comic books. Two gentlemen with a wealth of talent in multiple arenas. And they're here to talk about the old guard, talk about the process of how it became a movie going into Netflix, what we might be seeing in the sequels. I just finished reading both series this morning again, just to kind of get me a refresher onto the in the writing and the storylines, and also in the visuals drawn out here. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to Mainframe Comic-Con, Greg Rucka and Leandro Fernandez right here. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, how you doing?
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, good. Very nice to see you. ¿Cómo está, Leandro? Mucho gusto, hombre. Mucho gusto que estás aquí con nosotros.
Muchas gracias. Un gusto. Hello.
I love Greg. Look at Greg. He's just chilling. I love it. It must be hot where he's at, because it is hot here in LA for sure, my man.
Yeah, it's crazy hot in Portland today. It's 100 degrees. So
I hope you're staying safe there. A lot of madness going on. So I hope you.
There isn't. There is not a lot of madness going on. Come on. You know how cameras work.
Yeah, I do.
They film what's happening on 3 square blocks downtown around the Justice Center, and then they go, "Oh my God, the whole city's on fire." The city is perfectly fine.
Good to know.
You just got people who are not willing to, sit down and take it.
Well.
Don't believe the lies.
Don't believe the hype, as Public Enemy once said. And then this is a great segue too, Greg, into the old guard, because one of the things you're really known for over the last 20 years with the stuff you've created is to put a contemplative approach to all your work, a social justice approach to all your work, an exploration of humanity within all your work. And in the old guard, certainly that is there as these soldiers kind of confront the idea of what is a prolonged mortality, not an immortality. A prolonged mortality is how I kind of look at it, and what the various experiences are for them. And as I just said, I reread both series that have been out this morning again, because I have them as a collection, and I was blown away in the light of COVID, in the light of these protests, in the light of Me Too, in the light of Black Lives Matter, how interesting how prescient and interesting and topical this book is now, and even more so than it was when I first read it 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, find something I've done that where the politics don't leak in, and I'll give you a buck. I mean, but I look. We're gonna. I guess we're jumping in with both feet on the deep end.
We only have half an hour, so I like to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, look. Whatever we create as artists and we put out in the world, the goal is to tell a story, and the goal is to entertain.
Yeah,
absolutely. And Leo and I, we came to the old guard wanting to tell a fun story that people would, enjoy. But incumbent in that is the knowledge that we're putting out into the world, this tale, and you have to be cognizant of what you're saying. You have to own what it is that you're saying, and I really do believe it's incumbent on us to think about, we may not always be aware of the messages we're sending or the statements we're making, but that doesn't allow us the right to not try to be aware, right? Like, I'll screw it up. I admit I screw up all the time, but I'd much rather be exposed for unwilling ignorance and to be educated than to plow ahead gleefully ignorant, if that makes any sense. So
and that bleeds through in the characters you create, certainly in the old guard, because you have so many different points of views on this idea of their prolonged mortality. Andy just kind of reaching the end of her rope, as we see throughout the first series, and really, and I don't want to spoil too much, but really in the second series, by the end of that, you really see how far she has gone into the realm of like almost immobility in dealing with it. Just can't deal with it anymore. And we see shades of it in the movie as well. And I tell me, what inspired you to create these characters? You create such powerful female characters. Even when you took over Wonder Woman, you added some interesting new layers to her that maybe hadn't been seen quite as powerfully before. What attracts you about taking on characters like this or creating characters like this? I
don't. I guess it kind of goes back to this very core thing with me. I remember when I was I got out of college and I managed to get myself into a writer's program for graduate school. And I remember arguing with my thesis advisor as I was working on my first novel, where he told me that and he basically said, "You're doing it wrong." He was like, people don't want to read about, they don't want their heroes to make mistakes. And he was like, this guy should be more like James Bond. He should always have a move and so on. And I was like, dude, what? I mean, it was generational to me. I was 22 and he was clearly, I think he was in his late 40s, early 50s. And all I could think was, dude, I watched the Challenger blow up on TV one morning. I came into the world during Vietnam and Watergate. So the idea of a flawless protagonist is boring as hell for me. I find it far more heroic and far more compelling if you can ride with somebody warts and all, and you can see them trying to rise and recover from their setbacks and their mistakes, and oftentimes the mistakes of their own making. That to me is far more emotionally honest, at least, because I don't, there are plenty of people who go through the world going, I'm not responsible. I never did anything wrong. But when we encounter those people, we have a phrase for them. And that phrase is jerk. And you don't, there's something to be said about stories about jerks.
Right.
But you want to see them get their comeuppances. So, Andy in that way comes out of that, primordial soup that sort of all my characters end up sharing on some level. And again, no spoilers for the second series. If you all haven't read it, Andy's thing gets even more. She gets confronted by some of the other things that from her past that I think are essential to once again expose the flaws in a hero and make you connect with them. Because how many of us can look back on our 20s or 30s and be like, oh, I made some mistakes there. If I had been a little more wise like I am now, that's life, And I think right now we're in this very interesting moment where, and you can do certain things in a comic that obviously, you can't do in film, you can't do in television because of the time and the understanding, the audience's understanding of the time that you're working in. But we're living in this age where certainly social media would have you damned for a single mistake. And that is not to say there are not sins and crimes that should not be forgiven.
Right.
But it is to say that we need to moderate that, because otherwise we never learn. And if we cannot grant people the ability to be educated, the ability to learn from their mistakes, then it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
Because eventually you're going to step wrong.
Right.
I mean, it's going to happen. It's life. You're going to screw up.
Right.
And if we cannot grant in one another the ability to accept it, to own it, and to sincerely try to make right, if we can't grant that to others, we're in real trouble.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and I look forward to this third series and seeing how you tackle that with these characters, along with Leandro Fernandez, who is, I mean, your work, mi hermano, your work is just so beautiful to look at. Such cinematic masterpieces within these panels. I don't know how many times that I'm like, oh, I'm going to make that my computer wallpaper. I'm going to make that my computer wallpaper. It's just incredible what you're able to create. I think there was even a Vertigo reference in the second series in one of those panel shots, the shot there, which I thought was genius. Tell me, what inspires you to create these cinematic images within your work, and especially within the Old Guard?
Well, when we started with the Old Guard with Greg, we wanted this to be something, at least from my side, something unique, and I wanted to give my best from all the point of view. I mean, it took me at a moment when I was trying to focus a lot on what I wanted to do in terms of, I mean, the moment in my career. And we developed this from the point of view that it was the storytelling, the way we wanted to tell the story before the format of the book or anything else, including the storytelling visually, specifically. From the beginning, for example, when Greg sent me the first script, he sent me 24 pages issue script, and I gave him back 36 pages issue. So, and if you take a look at that, it is not that I'm buying space to play. You know, it's just that this is a very visual story. Yeah. And in some way, I've been waiting for this story all my life, for something like this to be done. The tone, the genre of the story is something that I've been waiting for this so long that I wanted to do it the best that I can. Yeah. So that was our first step, and that's how we began with it.
Yeah, it must have excited you too. I mean, you know, when an American writer writes, most of the times they're writing about American stories. This is an international story. This is a global story. This is a story that spans the centuries. So the challenge for you and Greg, I'm sure, to make this accurate to the times that you're creating. And I'm sure there must have been a lot of conversations about, wait, would they have a button? What kind of material would they be wearing? What's the look?
Oh, you know,
how much work did you guys do in creating that together?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, go, Leo.
No, yeah, there, of course, there's a lot of that. And I enjoy a lot to take the time and the work to get information and the right documentation. But for sure, Greg is very accurate with his descriptions, and there are things he wants to put an eye on. I mean, he wants to tell something about that, so I have to be very careful with that. Yeah. And yeah, we interact in that way. Yeah, Greg.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was, you know, there's a sequence in the second series where I literally was trying to research if we knew if there were belt buckles at the time. You know, the invention in quotes of a button, you know, for clothing is actually a big moment in human development, and trying to go. And then the other thing, especially with Andy, that we discovered the hard way, because I had just, when I did it initially, I was like, oh, she's just really old. And then I like slapped down an age. Yeah. And I did not do that going, I did not do that in, with consideration of where that placed her in the historical record. Right. And then we started working on, and it came up in the movie a lot, and it came up for the second series a lot. You know, I went to the British Museum looking to gather reference so I could take photos.
Oh, wow.
So I could send them to Leo. So it'd be like, so like, here's some jewelry and so on and so forth. And the section they have for roughly the period that would be Andy's lifetime is almost non-existent. It's literally 2 little cases because she comes out of an era where all of those artifacts are pretty much gone because they got destroyed to make the Bronze Age. Right. So it was sort of this realization of going, oh, wow, I picked like this great big dead zone in terms of the historical record, which is which has some good, but has some downsides. And one of the really cool things that's come out of actually the movie, is we've got a lot of historians and linguists who are really fans. You know,
great. That's good.
And that's a kick. That's kind of exciting.
You don't want someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson coming out like he did after Gravity going, yeah, none of that is realistic at all, blah, blah, blah. You want people who are of accomplishment and note in those fields to laud your comic and your series for being accurate, because it speaks volumes to the kind of precision with which you approach the creation.
At least you want to show some respect, you know? and I think, look, there's a sequence in Force Multiplied, you know, that takes place on the deck of this, you know, it's on board this galleon. Yeah. And little did I know as I was writing that sequence that's like, turns out that's one of Leandro's things, right? Like he got the pages and he was like, oh my God, I can't wait to draw this because, and if you look at the ship, all of the rigging is correct. I mean, he did not, it's all historically accurate. And it's like, damn, man. So.
Well, particularly with ships, I love to draw them. I love that. Yeah. And I had a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, that sequence is incredible, man.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you like it.
With all of this, you just mentioned the movie, Greg. So, you know, and you've been doing, this is kind of, you're kind of blowing up over the last few years with all the stuff you're doing. You know, you're a New York Times best-selling writer. You've won Eisner Awards. You're behind what's happening with Batwoman over there at CW because of the work you did on the page, and now this is happening for you. Queen and Country has been in, you know, kind of development over the last
perpetual
development, which is a signature of Hollywood. That means you really made it if you have something in perpetual. It means they want to keep working with you, in my opinion. So, but like, when you were looking at it, because it's rare when the comic book artist becomes the screenwriter of the film. How was that negotiation? Like, how did that come about for you? How important, I guess, was it for you to be that person who writes the screenplay for this?
It was a condition for this one. You know, in the past, things had been optioned and purchased, and I've had varying degrees of participation in what's going on, you know, and in the main, I tend to pull back because I felt for a very long time that we're talking about different skill sets, and that the ability to write a comic well has things in common with writing a teleplay or a screenplay well, but they're not the same things. In the same way that, you know, writing a comic is not writing a novel. Yeah. And we've seen prose writers try to transition, some with more success than others. So when Skydance came around on the old guard, we said to them pretty clearly, you know, that the condition for this deal is that I'm going to do the draft.
Right.
And in Hollywood terms, that's not actually a huge ask. Right. Because
they'll bring other writers in.
Yeah, exactly. It's just they change writers like socks most of the time. So they're like, okay, we'll do a draft or two. And once he's out of contract, we can fire him and we'll bring in, quote unquote, a professional. Yeah. But the reason I pushed for it is that I was at a point where I felt that I could do it. Right. And I felt that certainly with the old guard as a movie, and Skydance was very clear about this, and all props to them. You know, they said, no, we want this series.
Yeah.
This is not a case of going, we're going to call it the old guard, but we're going to make it about 3 Dobermans trying to find their way through the Himalayas, right? They were very clear that they were buying the book and that's what they wanted.
Right.
So the adaptation process was eased by that, and it was also eased by the fact that the guy I was working with at Skydance, Matt Grimm, was phenomenal. I mean, he was a great rabbi to have for this.
Right, right.
What is more surprising is not that they gave me the bite at the apple. It's that I was able to successfully hold on to the apple and see it all the way through. That's
and get
the
credit. And get the credit as written by, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the thing, and I'm still not 100% sure how we managed it. There you go.
I know you were on set. I've read that Leandro was on set as well. Leandro, why
he was
were you
on set more than me?
Yeah,
Leandro was on set more than me.
That's even rarer that the artist of the comic is on set. Were they talking with you about the look, about the costumes, about the feel? Like, what was your experience on set for this whole thing, Leandro?
Well, the experience was, I have to tell you, I always wanted to go to a movie set way much before than this. And having the experience to be on the set of our comic book, it doubled the bed. You know, it was something that I wasn't expecting something like that. And it was amazing in many fronts for me because for what you asked me, the moment we went to the set, the production was already been working on, and most of the things were based on what we already done on the comic. Right. So the process was that way. They worked hard to keep the essence of the comic. So it was like it was an intention of that, and you could see that. And on the other side, for me having on the movie set, figure out that I was very anxious to go there, and as my work is to tell the story with images the same way, in some way, like a movie does. I wanted to see how they do the little works everywhere to make the story on the screen.
Right.
So it was like very interesting for me to see how many people are working on that, and on the opposition with my work, with this absolutely lonely work.
Right.
So it was very exciting. And the moment I got to the set, it was the moment there was a special dialogue between Joe and Nikki. I guess for those who seen the movie must know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But it was a very special moment on the whole movie. And I just arrived to the set. The first thing that I see is that.
Yeah.
And I'm watching that dialogue, and I find myself, moving the lips as the guy we're talking is like, I knew that dialogue. And it's a very emotional dialogue.
Yeah.
And after that, I've heard that it was just the same as it was on the comic book. I mean, it's something you, Greg, wanted to be just as it is on the comic book.
Yeah.
So it was very surprising for me. And that's the way it just started. After that, it came all the set in the studios in the UK, the locations, Morocco. Right. It was amazing. It was a really good experience.
And they put Leo to work the first day too. Like Joe, if you've seen the movie, the sketchbook sketch is by Leo.
Right.
And Joe's hands when he's working on the sketch, that's Leandro. And I mean, he showed up and they're like, oh, okay, here you go. And that was, I mean, the delight in watching Leo's bewilderment and delight was fantastic. It was something else. Yeah.
Let's answer this question, and I'll come back to Joe and Nikki real quick because I have a question for you guys on that. Lohit Sastry wants to know: will Greg do more independent stuff going forward? Are we getting Lazarus, a Lazarus movie or TV show? People love Lazarus, man. You're selling those shirts, you're selling those books.
Yeah, we have a bonfire the website Bonfire. We have a Bonfire store. It's called Nervous Habit Threads, 3 words. And we've got like Lazarus shirts that with Michael Lark original pieces and designed by Michael and Eric Troutman. And we now have a couple Old Guard shirts with original art by Leo. And all that money goes to various charities. The nice thing about working with Bonfire is you can set it up so that you can do different clothing styles, and they will just send the profits after cost straight to the designated charities. Yeah, I mean, look, you know, I've got a couple other things I'm working on. I don't know when they're going to see the light of day. Nicola and I have the next 5 issues of Black Magic are pretty much, she's finishing up issue 17 right now. So those are going to be coming out monthly. And then Nick is, she's got some obligations, so she's going to fulfill that work. And then we're going to get back to that. Lazarus, we were hoping to have out this month, but frankly, we all got COVIDed pretty hard, which is not to say sick, but suffering from the current situation. So that's been pushed and looks like it'll be out either October or November.
Okay.
There are 3 other projects in various stages of development. And the 3rd Old Guard series, and one other thing that may be Old Guard related that we're discussing now.
Okay.
So I'm not sure there will be anything quote unquote new out in 2020. But 2021 might be one of those years where all of a sudden we're vomiting forth. Here are all these books. on the Lazarus of it all, we were in development with Amazon for a very long time, and that has finally come to an end. And we are now figuring out the next move.
All right.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, like the Old Guard, Lazarus is something that, look, you know, Stumptown made it to ABC. It didn't need me, right? The people responsible for that, I'm there as an optional creative resource. Like the Old Guard with Lazarus, that's something that I intend to be involved in.
Yeah.
I want to do it. I want it. Should we do a TV series? I really want it to be what Michael and I created, in the same way that delivering the Old Guard was about, you know, trying to preserve what Leo and I had created. So
yeah. Well, you just saw there, they've expanded us to an hour because we're almost at the half an hour mark. So if you guys can stick around, let's keep it going if you're down.
Yeah.
All right. So the question I wanted to ask you guys, after rereading these 2 series again this morning, and after just kind of looking and then watching some of the scenes from the movie again here on Netflix, it strikes me that quite possibly, and I know you spoke about this in previous interviews, how the first series was about you dealing with the death of your father, which really moved me. I lost my father in 2008 to cancer. So kind of rereading the series through that prism was actually a very, very interesting way to consume that first series that you guys worked on for the Old Guard. But it struck me that just maybe I think that Joe and Nikki are you two. That you speak so eloquently about Leandro's drawings and you in all your writings that maybe you're the romantic and Leandro is just looking at you as such a romantic. You know, is that a possible thing that maybe was subtly working through?
I'm definitely a romantic. I'm a sentimentalist.
Yeah.
I'm sappy. I cry easily at movies. I don't think, I mean, to take the question in absolute seriousness, I don't think Joe and Nikki were ever, none of the characters were ever really quote unquote me or anybody I know.
But it feels like that relationship, because they're saying it's beyond boyfriend. It's more than that. You guys have worked in the country, and it feels like there's a love there between you for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And you can't look. I have no career in comics unless I am collaborating with artists who, and in particular with artists who are not just talented but gifted, right? I mean, because I can come up with the best story in the world, but in the hands of the wrong collaborator for that project, the project's not going to work.
Right.
Leandro and I have been working together now for almost 2 decades, off and on.
Wow.
Yeah. And the guy you're seeing on your screen there is who you get. He is a generous, creative, empathetic, joyful guy. I have never, and look, I mean, we live in different countries. We have not spent as much time together as we have worked together. But I am very hard pressed to think of a moment when I have not seen Leandro with a smile for another or with kindness for another. And I mean that in all sincerity. This isn't me blowing smoke. And I think it's much harder for him to say the same about me. I suspect he'd be like,
of course. And now is the moment that we kiss.
Such a romantic, Greg. Such a romantic. I love it. It's been a joy to revisit all of this. So let's talk about how this all came about to be a movie. I know you've spoken about in other interviews, but maybe for some people who haven't watched or haven't read some of those or seen those interviews, it's such an unusual path you took for both of you to be involved in this movie. But certainly, Greg, we spoke earlier about you coming on as the screenwriter, but you also made it a requirement, speaking of Joe and Nikki, that scene between them has to stay in the movie. The LGBTQ representation, you wanted it to be a very powerful part of this story in the movie as well. You didn't want them to shirk away from it, which some properties tend to do when they have characters like this. Yeah,
but look, I think one of the things that Leo and I hit on very early when we started working on it, and I think we were working on various incarnations of what would become the old guard back in late 2013, 24. I was going through some files, and there are sketches from Leandro back in 2014 of sort of proto-Andy.
Right.
And one of the things I knew when I was constructing the mythology, because Andy came first, sort of Andy was the manifestation of the story, and she sort of was the lightning rod around all these other ideas coalesced that I had for years and years and years.
Right.
I resolved pretty early on that I didn't want to have to spend, certainly in the first story, a lot of time, or frankly any time, justifying the mythology that they could do this. They could. That was the base premise. We went from there.
Yeah.
But I knew in doing that people were gonna be inclined to try to figure out the how and the why of it.
Right.
And I wanted to make the nature of the blessing and or curse of it universal.
Yeah.
I didn't want somebody to go, okay, well, it's only if you do this and you do this and you do this, you're immortal. It needed to be broadly inclusive. And you know, one of the things in working with Skydance never had a problem with that. And I had a conversation with Don Granger at Skydance at one point saying, I'm surprised nobody ever asked me to get rid of the armored car sequence. And he said, you know, and I've said this in other interviews, but he said to me, quote, if that scene had not been in the screenplay, I would want to know why. That's one of the things we acquired it for.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you take that attitude on the part of Skydance, and then you take Gina Prince Bythewood as a director, and that was not an uphill battle for me. I can't speak to any other battles that might have been fought, but I was never in a situation on sets where we were ever arguing those core principles.
Right.
It was always any discussion, any argument on set was about how do we make it better?
Yeah.
Not, is this dangerous? Are we going to offend people?
Right.
That never, I was never, if that ever happened, I wasn't privy to it.
Right.
And yeah, man, I love working with people like that.
Yeah, I think it's great, honestly, and it shows. And you know you're with the right people when you get a reaction like that from Granger in that discussion.
Yeah.
With Gina Price Bythewood, you mentioned her. Charlize Theron, we'd be remiss not to mention her. Who came on to the project first? Was it Charlize?
It was Gina.
Okay, so it was Gina who came on as director first, and then you all went about. Did you have discussions about casting, or did you have?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
Gina and Skydance would reach out and say, "We're looking at this person. We've talked to this person." I didn't have any input, right? Okay. They would say, "We're talking to, fill in the blank," and I would be like, "Oh, that'd be awesome."
Right.
And it's interesting because it was sort of my first time seeing how that particular, sausage is made, and they come up with lists of like 60, 80 people. And then they sort of go through them and figure out. Charlize was not the first actress they went to.
Oh. Anything you want to break here? Any news you want to break here, by any chance?
There were a couple named actresses who were approached and who backed away for a variety of different reasons.
Okay.
And one of those reasons, I think, was that Andy is not an easy character to play.
Yeah.
And the nature of Hollywood, and I think the nature of being a woman who is a movie star, in quotes, in Hollywood, is that you are arguably constantly having to do image maintenance, right?
Yeah.
And you want to present in a certain way. And Andy isn't terribly, I think she's a very difficult part to play, number one. Number two, she's not nice.
Yeah.
And a lot of people look at women who are not nice and they go, bitch. And there are a lot of actresses who don't want to risk that being a tag on them.
Right.
I think it says a hell of a lot about Charlize Theron, that not only does she turn into parts like that, and I've said it elsewhere, you forget at your peril, the woman has won an Academy Award for a reason.
Yeah.
But I think, and this isn't to pat myself on the back, I think the actress who took on that part needed to be not only an actress who had the chops physically and performatively, but needed to be an actress who was incredibly brave. And I think if you look at Theron's CV, her courage is all over it. She does not back away from a challenge. So.
That's one of the things that people have grown to massively respect about her as an artist. You look at Imperator Furiosa, from which, of course, you have experience with, Leandro, from Mad Max, Fury Road. You look at her with what she did in Atomic Blonde. Obviously, you go back 10 years to Monster, which she won under Patty Jenkins' direction, that Oscar. And you see she is willing, as she could easily have just become an ingenue and lived that ingenue life. But she is willing to take on these more complicated roles and highlight things. I interviewed a few months ago the writer and director, Jay Roach, the director for Bombshell. And we spoke about her process when she came on and steered that ship into port to make that film happen, and selected him to direct it. And so she has a powerful energy to tell these more complicated stories about women. And not just be, oh, they're tough. It's layers and complexity to show the empowerment of women.
And this is another thing I think it's worth bearing in mind, just for people who are curious how these things happen.
Yeah.
At first there was Skydance, then there was Skydance and Netflix.
Right.
And then when Charlize came on, there was Skydance and Netflix, and then there was Denver and Delilah, because Charlize is a producer.
Yes.
Right. And that is a manifest material contribution. And I'm incredibly proud of the work that Leandro and I have done. In all sincerity, I think that the movie is a better work.
Wow.
It benefits from a broader collaboration, of more deliberation, of being able to spend more time on characters that we really couldn't do in the comic.
Yeah.
And I am never going to be ashamed of the work Leo and I have done, but I think just objectively, you can put the two side by side, and you can say, as a prototype, this works beautifully.
Right.
As what it becomes, the movie is superior. So,
Interesting.
and that's ideal, honestly.
Yeah.
You would hate to be like, oh, here's an adaptation that's worse.
Right.
Right.
Right. And that was the ding that at times Zack Snyder had to live with Watchmen. And I think his director's cut kind of finally let people embrace what he was trying to do with that piece. And it's a fair point you bring up. I ask you both this question. I'll go to Leandro. You first. You've been on set now. You know, the way you draw is so cinematic. The two cinematographers, Barry Ackroyd and Tammy Raker, was there, like, as you walk into a third series now, is there influence from having been on the set for some of your images and for some of the writing and storylines that may be developing here as you walk into the third series of this?
Of course. I mean, it's not specifically for being on the set, but because I've tried to learn and catch everything from everywhere I go. As you know, the comic artist's work is to show on images a story. But the difference with the movie director is we have to think in all the details that go to a page. We don't have the luck on our side for if anything happens by itself. I mean, every little detail is on the page is there because we meant that to be there. So we have to be a little bit obsessive, paying attention to a lot of things. And building a movie in some way is about that. Is to having a lot of people working on the something to create the visuals to tell the story.
Right.
So yeah, of course, I've learned from being there and from watching that and a lot of things. And at the same time, the characters we've created, now they have their own voice. And there's been another process beyond that, and not only because of the movie itself, but also by the feedback by the audience. I mean, I've seen, for example, a lot of fan art from another artist doing their versions from the characters. I mean, it's something that's way beyond my expectations. So it's something that we created on the loneliness of our studios. As all of a sudden, you have this, it has its own life, and it moves in some ways by itself. So it's really amazing the path it's taking.
Yeah, yeah. Greg, thoughts on that?
No, I can't. It's actually, there's a weird cognitive dissonance now working on the comics versus working on the movies, because aside from the continuities diverging, you know, I have to remind myself, and we have conversations where I will say Quinn, and our editor Alejandro Arbona will say, "You mean Noriko?" And I'll be like, "Right, yeah, sorry. I mean, do you know who I mean?"
Yeah.
It is impossible to not be it's impossible for them at this point not to cross-pollinate.
Yeah.
So,
You had to change that for the movie at the request of the actress who was cast originally as the Noriko character to Quinn. So now it'll be interesting. And if you come on to the sequel, and we'll get to that in a little bit, like that almost opens new doors for you to explore. There were some changes from the first series to what you put up on the screen. You got rid of the kind of Ed Hardy villain from the comic book, turned him into more of a farmer bro, as they say, which I thought worked really well as well. I enjoyed that movie a lot. It took a while to sink in, and once it did, you're like, oh, here we go, let's go on this interesting and new ride. So Gina Prince Bythewood deserves so much credit for what she was.
I think she did a remarkable job.
You all's work for sure. Let's get into some of these questions, and we'll circle back to a possible sequel here. Shauna Lindsay wants to know: was it always your dream to be a screenwriter and filmmaker? Greg, do you ever see it taking the place of comic book writing? Yeah. Do you ever just slow down with 500 projects? Do you ever?
I think I can remember, you know, being in high school and writing a screenplay, or trying to write a screenplay, and so you know, the dream of writing a movie, I think, was one that had been there for a very long time. I tend to view it as but my first literary agent gave me some very good advice. He said that at the end of the day, you're a storyteller, and your job is to work on the craft of storytelling.
Yeah.
And what has happened since that fateful day, you know, that we had that discussion some 30 years ago, is I think I have tried to actively acquire the skill sets for the different means in which to tell the stories. So I have the luxury now of, if I have an idea for a story, I can visualize what I think is the best vector for it. If it's a comic, or if it's a novel, or if it should be a teleplay or a film.
Right.
I will say I have loved writing a feature film and seeing it get made. And it is something that I intend to continue to do.
Okay.
That said, I don't see myself ever abandoning comics, because I love comics.
Yeah.
And I want to make comics.
In that second series, you speak about, in one of those back pages where you're writing, you speak about how comics is really a powerful medium for you to write the things you want to write. So, because you talk about the economy of the pages, you know, what am I buying with one page that I hope will pay off in another page. So that's, you know, I love that you don't want to walk away from it, because your work is just incredible. Both of your works are just phenomenal to watch and to read. The other question here, Keith Miller has questions. Love both Old Guard and Lazarus. We often chat about them on the Coffee and Heroes pod. Nice shout out for yourself there, Keith.
Thank you.
Greg, now we're a few issues in. How are you adapting to the quarterly format of Lazarus Risen?
Well, I figured out how to write for it. That was the trick. And I think you see it in particular in Risen issue 1, less in Risen issue 2. By the time we get to Risen 3, I'd figured it out. You know, I had trained myself to write these 22 to 24 page issues, and we had done 28 of them. And then we hit this new format where all of a sudden we're telling 44 page, you know, you get 44 pages of Michael's storytelling, sometimes more. And that was, there was a gear shift. I needed to learn how to work in the format. That said, I am loving having the room and being able to do it as we do it. And also being able to fill, you know, it's a 64 page quarterly. So you're going to get a minimum of 44 pages of Michael's storytelling. The remainder is, you know, back matter that includes short fiction that Michael has illustrated, that includes the ongoing letter column discussions, artifacts, you know, by Richard Howe and Eric Troutman, and even some supplementary material for the Green Ronin role playing game. So I'm digging it. I mean, I think it's working actually really well now. But it did take a little while to find my legs.
Word Balloon says this was amazing, and I've loved turning friends onto it. They're caught on the tease of a sequel and are thrilled. Also love this team on their Queen and Country Story arc 2. So the tease of a sequel. Let's speak about this, because we've got that third series coming up. As I said, I've reread that second series again this morning, and it gets me even more excited for the possibility of sequel. But you move some things around in the movie from the second series into the movie, and I found that to be interesting. So is this happening? Are you working on it? Is it going forward? What stage of the sequel is it right now?
We are in the everybody wants to do a sequel stage. We have not officially announced one, because everybody wanting to do it does not mean everybody has signed paper saying they will do it.
Ah, okay.
That said, that said, the intention is clearly there. Now, something can go horribly wrong, but the intention is there, and all of the actors are all of the actors are locked in. If they do one, they are there.
Okay. Okay.
There is a story for the second.
Okay.
That is, and this is the interesting thing, I think. You know, you could adapt Opening Fire pretty much beat for beat to make the first movie.
Sure.
You cannot adapt Force Multiplied beat for beat, simply because Force Multiplied really doesn't have a plot until you get to issue 5.
Right.
And that would be a really crappy movie. And nobody wants to make a really crappy movie.
True.
We'd like to make a really, really good movie. So in this instance, I would argue that I think you're going to see, should we get there, you're going to see a lot of the ideas and a lot of the thematics carry forward, and there will be sequences that will be the same.
Yeah.
But for instance, if you've read Force Multiplied, this is spoilers, but if you've made it this far, you should have left already.
Yeah.
You know, Force Multiplied, Booker doesn't truly re-enter the story until the last issue of the series.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot make a movie where Matthias is only going to show up in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah. It's too magnetic of a
exactly. And it would just betray so many of the principles. So there is a plan, there is a way forward. But to be honest, and I think again, this is the natural outgrowth. You're going to see, if there is a second movie, if there is a third movie, and so on and so forth, you're going to see it by definition have to diverge more and more from what we're doing in the comics.
Yeah. Simply
because the comics are always going to be, I don't want to say smaller, but perhaps maybe more intimate might be the better way to put it. Those stories are going to be more intimate than what you're going to want on a film. So.
Someone screaming 6 movies and 3 spinoffs.
I'm sure Netflix would love it too.
Yeah, if there's the audience for it. And I do want to give some love here. I mean, it's 72 million households during its 4 weeks that it was out. When it came out on July 17th, over those 4 weeks, 72. It was among the top 10 most successful original launches in the platform's history. And by August of this particular month, it was reported that 10.6% of subscribers had watched the film over its first month. So that gives a lot of positivity to this. It's about, I think it's 70 or 80 over there on the overall score of it. So it's like, I think
it's like in an 81 or 82 on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah. And I mean,
yeah,
the movie, look, I mean, both Leo and I are aware that we released the movie in the summer of self-isolation.
Yeah.
When people had watched everything that they wanted to watch on Netflix, and here was a new thing.
Right.
So we certainly are benefit. We may be the only people who can say, "Hey, COVID did us a good turn." But that said, as I've had many people remind me, if it was bad, people wouldn't watch it.
Yes, I have to tell you that absolutely, because people now, if they don't like it and they hear it's not good, they won't waste their time on it. Because people, I think now in COVID more than ever, have relied on the old reliables to go back and revisit and watch over and over again because they are so worried about the world. They want to go to a place of comfort. And so if they enjoy the movie, and if that many people, that's word of mouth and critics. And so, yes, absolutely. I wouldn't just default it to COVID. I think it's actually a damn good movie. A lot of people liked it. And the actors throughout were great.
Cast was amazing.
Yeah. Kiki Lane, how does this come about? I mean, she's fantastic as Niall Freeman. Like, did Gina bring her on? Was she already somebody you guys have been talking about?
She auditioned. We had talked to Tessa Thompson had been the first person that they had talked to for Niall, and now I'm telling all sorts of tales out of school. and she had been very interested, but both Westworld and the Men in Black movie at the time made it so she couldn't do it.
Gotcha.
And I believe there was at least one or two other women that I know Gina had gone to, and then Kiki auditioned.
Yeah.
And I didn't see the audition. I remember what happened, which was literally the day she auditioned. And my understanding was she had filmed her audition, and then she had sent it. And Gina saw it. And Gina saw it at the same time or on the same day that Matt Grimm and Dawn Granger and Dana Goldberg at Skydance saw it.
Gotcha.
And I got a text from Gina that was, "Oh my God, we found Niall. She is unbelievable. She's so good."
Yeah.
And within 10 minutes, I had Matt Grimm calling saying, "So we just saw Kiki Lane's audition, and the first scene had us howling and on the floor, and the second scene had us weeping.
Wow.
And she is Niall."
Wow.
So the casting, and I think that was sort of indicative of the process. The casting was really deliberate. Like Gina knew, like she found Marwan, and then she brought Luca in to do a chemistry read with him. Right. She was very careful in putting everybody together and seeing if they would play off of each other appropriately. And boy, did it pay off in spades.
Yeah.
So.
Did either of you have? I know we got to wrap up in 5 minutes, guys. Real quick, did either of you have the actors or the actresses come up to you on set and be like, "Am I creating this correctly? Am I bringing this character to life?" Because sometimes you hear about, because I do voiceover, and sometimes actors come in and they don't want to be directed, and this is the take, and I'm out. Like, was it more a collaborative process with them as well?
I'm sure Leo's got his own answer to this, but I think actually. I'm actually trying to think. I think I remember having a specific conversation with Matthias about Booker on set. Like it was between setups and he was in his little tent, which makes it seem like he had a tent. And it's not. They had like a canopy and he had a chair,
Right.
And when I got on set, and Marwan and Luca were like tight. There's a photo that Leo took and sent me that I put up on Instagram of the two of them kicking a soccer ball around at Shepperton Studios between setups. But they really were like best buds.
That's awesome.
And I remember getting to set and being introduced to them together, and Marwan immediately being like, I'm reading this poem. I think this is a great Joe poem, and I love this speech. So they, in many ways, they already knew who they were playing. They had the characters.
Nice.
It was more often questions about like, what do you think about this?
Right.
Or would they have experienced this?
Yeah.
And that was, from my point of view, it's like, I'm happy to provide whatever information you feel I can, but they're yours now.
Yeah, that's great. Now, what about Leandro?
It's good. Yeah. It's like when we made the comic book, I wanted to give everything that I could. I wanted to give my best. And what moment that you already finished that is, I said, okay, this is it. I mean, it's like I am Boyd right now. I mean, it's done, and it's what Greg said. Now that it's done, now you have to start from this and do your thing, and that's what they do. I mean, I've been in set. I met the guys. I mean, the actors. They were great. They were very warm with us and very curious about our work. We have a really good talking, and they were giving life to those characters by themselves, and they done it great. I mean. I was afraid, not only by this, but the whole thing, to find myself in the usual position where the creator has to, be separated from the adaptation of his play. But we are on a new situation where it's all about joy. So I love the movie, and I'm proud to be related to that. So it's great.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've been blessed. We've been blessed.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
One last thing, and I know Chuck's coming in. So one last thing, can you tease anything about the third series coming out at all?
Do I have? I don't have the last issue
panel,
around.
Anything?
I don't suppose you have that teaser image, do you, Leo, nearby?
The teaser image of the the one is on the
the biggest thing I could say about the Old Guard 3 is that it has always been called Fade Away.
Oh, look at that! That looks fantastic.
Yeah,
this is on the last issue.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. I love it.
Good call, John. Very nice plug there, John. Good way to get the teaser right at the end, man.
Right, I mean, you got to plug it in. Leandro, esto es para vos. Punisher IMAX. I love the Punisher IMAX series. So that's when I first discovered this. So it's an honor to have met you and interviewed you. And Greg, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Chuck, for letting me host this one. It was a blast, my man.
Thanks to both you guys. Also, John, I mean, like I said, huge fan, man. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your very busy day to join us here at Mainframe Comic-Con, and I hope you'll return back for the next one. This is actually kind of turning into a nice little Collider reunion. We got Coy Jandro coming up right now.
Oh, nice.
With Mark Wade.
Oh, nice.
So, John, thanks a lot, man.
Thank you,
was
Chuck.
fantastic.